Hi everybody, it's Katie back with another episode of my vlog, and it is Sunday, so it's time for the Cinema Club Sunday Roundup. We started our week last week on Sunday. I told you guys we were going to watch The Sword and the Stone, of course, the 1963 Walt Disney classic animated movie, directed by Wolfgang Reitherman, who did a whole bunch of movies for Disney from the 60s through the early 70s, actually into the 80s, I think. In addition to Sword and the Stone, he also is the director of Robin Hood and The Jungle Book and 101 Dalmatians and a bunch of other ones that kind of all bear his directorial style, if you will. It is an incredible classic of Disney animation. I don't know how long it's been since you guys have watched it, but this is, of course, the story of King Arthur before he becomes King Arthur, when he's just a little boy working as a squire for a guy named Kay, who's going to become a knight. And our friend Arthur, or Wart as he's known as a little kid, is befriended and mentored by Merlin, the famous magician or wizard or alchemist or sorcerer, whatever you want to call him, and is shown the ways of the world and brought up a little bit, and then, of course, pulls the sword out of the stone, becoming the King of England. I think everybody loves this movie because of the cool sequences where we get to see Wart transformed from a human into another animal. There's a scene where he's a bird. There's a scene where he's a squirrel. There's a scene where he's a fish. It is really, really fun to see those. And of course, I think most people always remember the wizard battle between Merlin and the marvelous Madame Mim, the witch, who they meet in the woods, where they keep trying to outdo each other by taking on different forms until, spoiler, sorry, Merlin becomes a germ and makes Mim sick. It's very cool. If you've never watched it, watch it. It is a classic of Disney animation. If you haven't watched it recently, I'd recommend it. If you have kids especially, watch it with them. My kids, of course, loved it because kids love this movie. It's great all around. I've heard critics say the plot is a little bit thin, and it is. The story, there's not actually much story there. And I think it's because we already kind of know the deal with the later part of the Arthurian legend, and this is kind of a, let's just have kind of a fun take on what his life might have been like when he was a little boy, at least for this little tiny slice of it. It's not comprehensive in any way. But anyhow, recommended. That's a great one. Sword in the Stone, 1963, Disney animated. Then the next night, it was Jimmy's pick, and he decided to continue the Disney theme, but we went for an older Disney live action movie. He wanted to watch Old Yeller because he had recently read the book. And if you know anything about Jimmy, you know that he loves dogs. He's always looking for any media that has a dog in it or features a dog somehow. So he started reading Old Yeller. He found it on the bookshelf in the house, and just ripped through that one in a couple days. And then when he found out there was a movie adaptation, he wanted to see that too. So we all sat down and watched Old Yeller together. 1957, directed by Robert Stevenson, who did a lot of movies for Disney in from the late 50s through the mid 70s. He is the director on let's see, the Love Bug and the other Herbie movie, which I can't remember what the second one is called. The Absent-Minded Professor, Mary Poppins, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, a bunch of movies like that. Johnny Tremaine, I think he also directed. So it's kind of interesting to watch back-to-back Disney movies, animated and live action, from it's kind of the same era, 63 and 57, close enough to each other, that I would call them the similar era. So Old Yeller, have you guys seen this movie or read this book? It is about a dog who is adopted by some kids. He just like wanders onto their property. It takes place in the late 1800s, I think like 1870 or somewhere around there, kind of frontier days. The dad of the family is off doing something else, and this dog comes onto the property, and the younger brother of the family adopts him immediately. The older brother needs some convincing, but Old Yeller proves his worth. He's a little bit of a handful, constantly stealing meat and getting into trouble, but then he's always saving the kids in the family from outrageous enemies like a bear or a wolf or wild feral hogs or whatever. Old Yeller's always there to jump in and defend these kids and take the damage for them. So it's a great story. It's a classic movie and book. It's really wonderfully told. I love the kids. The two child actors who play the two brothers are fantastic in this movie. The dog is pretty great too. And spoiler alert, it has a really sad ending. I'm going to go ahead and tell you the ending of it. Sorry if you don't want me to. But Old Yeller gets rabies and has to be put down, as we say. And it's one of the kids who actually has to shoot him at the end of the movie. But we made it through. We were okay. We weren't crying about it too hard. It was a fun family watch. It's a little, it's a different kind of time to watch a movie from the 50s that's set in the 1800s. It's kind of the same experience we're having with the Western stuff that we're watching also. But if you can get into it, it's really fun watch. So Old Yeller, recommended, especially if you have kids. Again, the dog does die at the end. So, if your kids are very sensitive to that, maybe wait till they're a little older. But this is very much a movie and a book for kids, which is kind of designed to teach them the harsh realities of life and death. So Old Yeller, we enjoyed it a lot. The next night was Henry's pick, and he picked Cloverfield from 2008, the found footage horror monster movie. I gotta say, you guys, I do not like this movie. I apparently had watched it before and found it so boring the first time I watched it that I didn't even remember that I had already seen it when we went to watch it the other night. It took until 2/3 of the way through the movie. Then I was like, oh yeah, we have watched this one before. So I don't know, a lot of horror fans really like Cloverfield. A lot of found footage fans really like Cloverfield. I'm just not feeling it. I didn't think the actors gave great performances. I didn't think any of the action sequences were that interesting or believable. And I didn't like the monster that much when they finally showed the monster. So I don't recommend Cloverfield. I would say if you want to watch something in the Cloverfield franchise, I would watch the second one, 10 Cloverfield Lane. And actually the part of that movie that I like is the whole first, 4/5 of the movie before it actually becomes a Cloverfield movie, when it's just a high psychological horror taking place in John Goodman's crazy bunker. That's really cool. But I don't know, something about these filmmakers, the way that they're dealing with this particular monster or alien or whatever invasion is happening, it's not doing it for me. A lot of people really like these movies. I am just bored by Cloverfield. So, oh well, that's my opinion. Moving on, the next night was Wednesday, so we got back on our Western Wednesdays watch list, and we watched The Searchers from 1956, directed by John Ford and starring John Wayne. What is her name? Natalie Wood is in it very briefly. She's quite high on the credits, but only in the movie for a few scenes. She's got an important role, though. A lot of people consider this to be one of, if not the best Western ever made in America. Most people kind of gauge the spaghetti Westerns and the American Westerns separately from each other. It is an incredible movie. I'm really glad that we sat down and watched Stagecoach first before we watched The Searchers, because it's really cool to watch John Ford directing John Wayne again, 17 years later. This movie is in color, and it's spectacular color. The sweeping landscapes out in, God, where are they? They're in Texas, are unbelievable. The outdoor shots, the ones that are really outdoors and not on a soundstage. There are some cheesy kind of campfire shots on a soundstage, but the real outdoor shots are unbelievable. The whole thing is just totally beautiful. Really great performances from all of the actors. The story itself is a little thin, kind of like the Sword in the Stone story. John Wayne plays a ex-Confederate soldier who has come back to his brother's homestead in Texas after the war. And there's having some issues with the Comanche Indians nearby, who John Wayne calls the Comanche over and over again. And they get told to go off and protect some cattle that somebody had stolen, but it turns out to be a ruse just to get them away from the homestead so that the Comanches can come back in and basically slaughter John Wayne's entire family, except for his two nieces, who the Comanches abduct. And the whole rest of the movie is John Wayne and some other guys trying to go track down this tribe of Comanches and their leader, Scar, and find these abducted girls and rescue them from the Comanches. So it's really interesting to watch this movie right now, because obviously it has colonial and racist overtones to it, being a cowboys versus Indians movie. John Ford's treatment of the Comanches is actually really interesting. He does not portray them as, they're the bad guys in the movie, but he portrays them as noble and doing the negative deeds that they do for a decent cause, not just to go out and wholesale slaughter people. They are taking their land back from the white settlers who have come in and taken their land from them. There's a lot of actual Native American actors in the movie. Unfortunately, the leader of the tribe is played by a white guy in brownface, but it's pretty interesting to watch from a 2020 perspective, especially during the heat of all of this Black Lives Matter protesting going on. John Wayne's character is very racist towards the Comanches as a group, but every time he's dealing with individual Comanches one-on-one, he's totally cool with them. At one point, the guy who he's traveling with, whose name is Marty something or other, accidentally buys himself a Comanche wife, which is pretty funny. And John Wayne thinks it's very funny and basically treats her totally fine. She becomes part of their group that's going off to look for his missing niece. And he's completely cool to her. He doesn't treat her bad or, say shit to her or whatever. In fact, he helps communicate with her because his buddy Marty, who's just married her, doesn't even speak the language. So it's, it's complicated, but it's also a Western movie that was made in the 50s starring John Wayne. So it definitely has some racial overtones that are, a little cringy, if you will, in the modern lingo. Excuse me. One of the central points of the movie is that Natalie Wood's character, who has been kidnapped and winds up living with the Comanches for like 5 years before John Wayne finds her, is that she's like not a white woman anymore because she's been, polluted by being raised by the Comanches. And when he goes to collect her and bring her back, she actually says that. She's like, I don't want to go back. These are my people now. I've been living with them for 5 years, like from when she was 9 until when she was 14, she's been living with them. Why would she want to go with this white dude? And John Wayne's response is he wants to shoot her for that. His buddy Marty actually protects her from him. And in the end, John Wayne has a change of heart and rescues her after his buddies have, basically burnt the Comanche village to the ground and brings her back to her family. But he's no longer, at least no longer homicidal towards her. It's a heavy movie. There's a lot there, but it's also a beautiful movie. It's just those shots, the way that it's set up, and great performances from everyone in the movie. I would definitely give it a watch. Maybe not right now if you're feeling like very, worked up by everything that's going on in America and everything. Save the Cowboys and Indians movie for another time. But I definitely recommended. It is a fantastic Western and really a gem of kind of the 50s American Western, just as a thing. Definitely worth a watch. The next night after we watched The Searchers, I kind of needed an antidote to that racial stuff from the 50s. And so I showed the kids Do the Right Thing. This is, of course, the 1989 stone cold classic, written, directed by, produced by, and starring Spike Lee. It is my favorite Spike Lee movie of all of them. It's the third movie that he made. I think it is a perfect movie. I have no negative criticism about this movie at all. It is an incredible movie. It was an incredible movie when it came out in 1989. It has continued to be an incredible movie that has moved me to tears every time I've watched it since then. And boy, you guys, watching it this week amidst all of this protest going on, it was something to watch it this week. So before I say anything else, I just want to say everybody should watch this movie right now. If you've seen it a million times, doesn't matter. You need to watch it again. If you've never seen it, you absolutely have to watch it. If you know it and love it backwards and forwards, still watch it again. I mean, I've seen this movie, 20 times. Watching it right now, it was unbelievable to watch it right now. I usually recommend watching it on the hottest day of the year because that's when it's set. And I do like to have that kind of environmental experience with the movies I'm watching, but don't wait. Go ahead and watch Do the Right Thing right now. It was kind of interesting. There is a line in Fight the Power, which of course is played over and over and over through the movie, the Public Enemy song, where Chuck D is like fuck Elvis and John Wayne. And it was so funny to listen to that over and over the day after we watched The Searchers. It really made an impact on me this time. The movie is just incredible. I don't want to say too much about it, but it is the hottest day of the year in a Brooklyn neighborhood. Racial tensions are high between Black folks that live in the neighborhood and an Italian family that runs a pizzeria in the neighborhood. And shit just goes sideways in a really gnarly way. The climactic scene of the movie, of course, is incredible. It is a gut wrencher. And watching it right now during all this protest stuff, it is unreal how I want to say it's like Spike Lee saw into the future, but it's not that Spike Lee saw into the future. It's that this shit with police brutality has been a massive problem in America for so long. Here's Spike Lee in 1989 making a movie where he's building on decades of history and responding to decades of history of police brutality and making this movie. And here we are 31 years later, and it's still just as relevant as the day it came out. It's frightening how relevant it is. In fact, the only thing that makes the climactic scene of the movie not look like it's taking place today is when the police show up, they look like regular old-fashioned beat cops in a uniform without any riot gear. I think that like the most like riot gear anybody has is like one of those little flimsy kind of helmets with a tiny little thin plastic shield in front of it, and they don't have any crazy weapons, and they don't have a tank or these giant ATVs or whatever else. And it really, really is a stark contrast to the insane paramilitary force look that most just normal police departments have these days. Anyhow, I could go on forever about this movie. It is a perfect movie. It is an extremely relevant movie. It is an extremely important movie. It is one of my favorite movies of all time. I encourage everyone, please watch Do the Right Thing. It's going to make you feel uncomfortable. It might even make you cry, but that's important. So do it, watch it. On a lighter note, we rounded out the week with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Sean really wanted to watch a Terry Gilliam movie after we had viewed 12 Monkeys last week, and that's the one that he picked. Henry pieced out of it, but James actually rode all the way through with us, even though, you know, I mean, it's a crazy drug journey. This is obviously a movie for adults. I don't think he understood most of what was going on in the movie, but he wanted to give it a try. So big ups to James for that one. It is, of course, a story based on the Hunter S. Thompson book, starring Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro. It is this insane, drug-fueled road trip, gonzo journalist, wild adventure through Las Vegas is where they go. If you do know Hunter S. Thompson and his work, this movie is really fun. If you don't know Hunter S. Thompson's work, this movie is kind of a cool introduction to him. So I really like it. I think it's really about as good as a drug movie gets. It's always hard to portray drug trips and people being high in movies. It's sort of like portraying dreams, right? It's not something that's easily captured on film, and there's a lot of movies that don't do it well. Fear and Loathing does a really, really good job of capturing that thing, the drug trip, both physical and mental, right? So it's a hilarious piece of trivia about this movie that I learned when I was researching for today's vlog. Apparently, Benicio del Toro, to bulk up for his role, ate 16 donuts a day for 9 weeks so that he could gain 40 pounds really quickly. I can't even imagine how you could eat 16 donuts a day. But anyhow, recommended if you like Terry Gilliam's work, Johnny Depp or Benicio del Toro as actors, the writing of Hunter S. Thompson, or insane drug trip movies in general. It's a great one. So that's what we watched this week. What did you guys watch this week? I'm always curious to hear about what plans you have for viewing coming up. I don't know what we're watching tonight. It's Sean's birthday, so it's going to be his pick again. So we're going to have to see what he comes up with, and you guys will have to stay tuned for next week's Cinema Club Sunday Roundup to find out. Good one tripping on my tongue there. I'm going to leave it here. You guys take care, stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time.